I like businesses that are kind of in that 50K to maybe a couple of 100K. Some of the best deals I've done were at the top end of that. And some of the smaller ones, they don't quite fund the operations. So if you buy a business that's, say, valued at 200K and you take 100K profit out of it, you can easily pay your team and still have profit. But the smaller ones, although the percentage yield's the same, you don't have enough actual dollars a year to pay the team to cover it.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. My name is Jeff Barnes. I'll be your host. And today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Sophie Howard, who is an expert in buying online businesses. And I think this will be really intriguing for a lot of people who might not be ready to invest in startups, might not be ready to go out there and build their own company, or might be tired of running their own company and are looking for a way to buy companies that they can afford with their own cash, maybe go get a loan if you need to, or potential partner. But buy those and fund your lifestyle by running online businesses with very low overhead that are also very profitable. Sophie has bought over 24 businesses in just the last couple of years and sold a couple of her own for 7 figures. And so I think you're going to learn a lot from this episode, and I really look forward to hearing about your comments. Thank you.
Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions, the place to learn how to fund, scale, exit, and massively profit as an angel investor or entrepreneur. Brought to you by the Angel Investors Network. And now, here's your host, Jeff Barnes.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes. And today I have Sophie with me. Sophie, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. And Sophie is one of those unique guests. She's actually in a different time right now. She's almost 24 hours ahead of me while we're recording this. So it's her Saturday morning. It's my Friday early afternoon. So, Sophie, thanks so much for being here. I know we're going to have a lot of fun talking about a very unique topic to the Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions space, and that is acquiring businesses. But before we get into that, and acquiring a very specific type of business, before we get into that, why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So I live in New Zealand, which is a long way from where I was born in England. And having, excuse me, having done a science degree and an MBA and worked in a tech transfer office, I could see the thrills and the highs of the startup world and how exciting entrepreneurship was. But I was being paid a full-time salary to do that when I worked in that role doing startups free university. So I had all this sort of safety net of the salary and all the excitement of these amazing projects. So I knew I always wanted to be some sort of entrepreneur. And when I was on maternity leave with my second child, my daughter, I looked into what I could start from home online with a pretty tight budget and see what I could run from home. And I had to kind of pay quite quickly, quite well. It wasn't sort of a hobby business. And I started an Amazon FBA business of all things, which was all the rage in 2013. And what I did a bit differently there from the many, many other people that started Amazon businesses in 2013, I didn't source from China. I got really, really high quality handmade products and sold them for a huge price point and had a really good run. I think I did about $1.6 million in the first year from this little handmade baby gift. And then when everyone else was going, right, we better start Facebook ads and start selling on Walmart, and everyone was diversifying and doing a Shopify store, I had my business valued at 15 months old. And I've got a friend who's a broker. He's Australian, but he lives in the States as a broker. And I said, oh, Jock, what would this business be worth? I've just finished my first sort of tax year end, done a full year of trading and a little bit. What do you reckon? He goes, oh, I'd get you $1 million for that tomorrow. So I sold it for $1 million. Pretty much the next day. First person to see it bought it. He gave me $1 million. I gave him the password and off we went. And so that paid off an entire mortgage. And then I quite liked selling businesses, but I had to build another one to sell. So I built another business that was organic tea. So loose leaf tea leaves. And I sold that to some investors in New York City, actually, who paid cash for it. And that was another 6-figure exit. And then did some other things in between. So now I've got lots of Kindle ebook selling on Amazon. I've been doing that for the last few years, doing less of the physical product game. I just found that world of e-commerce, there's a lot of stuff beyond your control that gets a bit hard. So while I've had some big wins in that corner, I think I'll stick with purely online and no physical goods for some foreseeable future. But I have bought businesses as well, and that's maybe what we'll spend more time talking about today. The last 4 years, I've bought 20-something, some small, some by my standards big, but not by your audience's big, but all with my own money, and put them into a portfolio of these very nice online digital assets.
That's awesome. So, it's kind of funny you mentioned the Amazon FBA. We actually, my partners and I, started up an e-commerce business in 2018, and we'd done $17 million in sales in 8 months. And we ramped it up incredibly fast, and we were just really, really excited. But we did exactly what you said everybody else was doing, and we found we fell hard. We were actually buying a lot of stuff from China. We were drop shipping all over the world. And lo and behold, we actually outsold our manufacturer's ability to produce. And so they started shipping out empty boxes. So you can imagine in the e-commerce space, when you're shipping all over the world, how that ended. It did not end well for us at all, to say it nicely. So I totally understand all the pain points, struggles, frustrations. I mean, we had 400,000 transactions happening in our business, and the accounting nightmare was a whole other ball of wax. So yeah, I can definitely appreciate what you'd gone through with that, and congratulations on those early successes, which obviously got you hungry for what you're doing now. So well done, and I'd love to talk with you about that transition from buying and building e-commerce businesses. Like you said, there's a physical product. First off, before we go into that, going from a handmade baby product, you said, to loose leaf tea company. What was your process for just figuring out what kind of products you wanted to sell?
It wasn't really a very data-driven mechanical process. It was more reading tea leaves, I suppose. So one thing with the baby products, I think I'd done a search for New Zealand, and I'd had in my mind, I'll have an advantage here because I can source some really nice product, like some honey from New Zealand or something that the world loves, but I could sell on the Amazon platform. And when I did a search for the keyword New Zealand of all the top selling products on Amazon, there weren't any doing any huge volume. So I quickly parked up the food and beverage categories because that was really tricky compliance. But I saw a product was being made with New Zealand wool. And it was just felted wool products made in Nepal by this charity in Kathmandu. And so I looked at their other catalogue of products and ordered 75 of them. And I think my confidentiality agreement with the guy I sold it to is expired, but just, out of respect for him, I don't want to say what the product is because it's still selling really well. So I won't reveal the actual product, but it was made in Nepal with hand felted wool that was grown. The wool was grown in New Zealand. So there was a New Zealand connection to that first product. The second one, when I'd sold the first business, I'd been talking to the broker, how can I up this multiple for the valuation? What are all the things, if I was to do this again, that gets the valuation higher? And he said, well, you really want a consumable, a subscription product or a repeat purchase, because the baby gifts, that was one and done. And so I started thinking around all the consumables. I had a bit more experience to take on the compliance side for food and beverage. And I could see that the coffee boys were making millions. So actually the guys that had started this ASM course, which was the one that everybody did, Amazing Selling Machine, they were selling coffee and making an absolute fortune. And everyone was copying the coffee trend, and there was more coffee than people drinking coffee. So I didn't do coffee, but I could see that there were some really high-end ones. So like Bulletproof Coffee was always selling really strongly with a much higher price point. And I drink tea because I'm English, and it wasn't a huge category, but I figured out I could probably be the number one in tea if I just did really, really good packaging and had a quality organic product and had some good, story about where the tea was grown or whether herbs or fruits. So I drink English style tea, which is like a black tea, hot with milk. My top seller in the States was something revolting to me, like strawberry and lychee or something. I couldn't drink it. I could barely smell the thing. It's just repulsive to me. But anyway, read the market, sell them what they want. Right. And I had a really, really good tea dealer who was Sri Lankan, and he would just go and, take my market research and go off and source the stuff and do all the packaging and food safety side of things. He was supplying Starbucks, actually, so that was good. He knew how to deal with the system. And I only ran that one for about a year, and I probably should have kept it because it's still doing really, really well. So I had really good packaging that made a big difference. The brand name was good. The story was unique. And I'm not really a branding person. I'm actually rubbish at branding, but it was more a gap analysis of the good coffees were doing this. The tea wasn't as big a market, so it wasn't really attracting competition. I really like those low competition bits of Amazon. There's so many aggressive people going after those big products. So kind of ducked and dived a bit in the background with a quiet product that nobody really noticed. And then a load of my competitors in tea were selling theirs as weight loss tea, which was just junk. It was just some laxative, basically. But Amazon's compliance team came down really hard on them and basically got rid of all my competition for quite some time. They all eventually came back, but I had a really good run with that product. And so I sold it probably too early, but it was quite a thrill building and selling. You know, it's a really quick cycle. And in New Zealand, we don't pay a capital gains tax. There's no tax on a business sale. So it was a real strategic advantage and one I should take advantage of. So I did. So I sold 2, but I haven't sold any others since. Since then, I've been buying. So the grass always looks greener. And these people I was selling the business to, it's like, oh my goodness, you didn't have to figure out shipping labels or find the supply. You just picked up an income stream. How good was that for you?
Right.
And good for me because I got the cash. So then, as I did a few other things over the years, it's like, well, maybe I should buy some online businesses because I kind of back my skill set to, you know, get things streamlined. I've got a really good little online team, been on all the big platforms. I don't like paid ads. I don't like social media, but I know sort of what I'm good at. So I bought some online businesses that related to authors because I had a book publishing business. So I bought a newsletter business for $280K and it returns $90K a year like clockwork. It's super easy. I do nothing on it. The girl who's the operator came with the business and it's total set and forget instant income stream. So I loved that deal. And it's still my favorite thing. Every Tuesday morning, so my team's all around the world. So on my Monday, all the Americans are still asleep. So on a Tuesday morning, I open my little inbox of instant messages and there's a post how much money that newsletter made this week. And it's always thousands or at least hundreds per week. So it's thousands a month. And it's just boring and steady. And it was a really, really good purchase. I might have had some beginner's luck because I've done a lot of due diligence on things that looked as good but turned out not to be as good. But it's a really nice model, a newsletter, because you're not exposed to Facebook costs or a Google algorithm change. So that was a good one. And then I did some much smaller deals to grow them. I did some deals a bit bigger than that. The last one I bought was $350K US, and that reviews online courses called coursereviewers.com. And that earns income through affiliate links from all the courses we review. So it's not kind of business school courses. It's more things like masterclass. You know, Mark Cuban's just in a masterclass training class. So review that. And then if people read the review to decide if it's worth buying and they buy it through my site, then I get some commission. So that was a really good purchase. And then I've done a bunch of much smaller ones and some WordPress kind of content sites. But about 20 different deals now. And it's been really interesting sitting on that side of the fence, being the buyer and looking for the flaws or the upside I could take advantage of or how it would fit into the rest of the portfolio. So it's been really fun and very lucrative and probably the best thing I've done in business.
Before continuing, please subscribe and share this video to help us reach more people and stay notified of our latest releases. Now, let's continue watching and learning.
Isn't it funny? Like you said, you went through business school and have all the education and all the trappings, and you were working with startups. I kind of did the same thing. I was working with one of the biggest companies in the world and helping them with innovation and technology projects and doing lots of investments. And the strategic corporate venture team was, buying and acquiring and investing in businesses. And I was looking at that saying, well, geez, I could do this thing myself too, right? And left and used to try running the business. It's very different.
Oh, yeah.
When you're the smaller entrepreneur and you're running a much smaller business without a huge team versus being a corporation. It's like, if we invest in it, it goes off to a whole other department. The other department takes care of everything else and they scale it up and so on, right?
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? How did you manage that? Being this person that has sort of a corporate background or a university background, and you were all of a sudden finding yourself in this entrepreneurial seat and now going from owner-operator to just owner. And I'm assuming you're not operating most of these businesses.
Correct. No, I'm not operating them. I'm not techie at all. So I think it's definitely a one-way path. I don't think I could go back into corporate world now with the flexibility I have. And, I have a really nice lifestyle. I've got young children and a dog and live in a ski town. And so it's a very lifestyle-y existence around here. So I think one thing that was really good was I got really good virtual assistants from early on. So I never got bogged down in the Amazon shipping labels level of detail or all that sort of anything repeatable admin. Like I outsourced really early on because I still had a salary coming in from the day job while I was on maternity leave. We have really good maternity leave in New Zealand, which was a nice thing. So we get 2 years actually, which is pretty good.
Wow.
And I sold a car. So I kind of had a little lump of cash. Not a lot of cash, but a little bit that got me off. And I just started it as you would start a real business. So none of this doing it myself or writing a blog for 6 years to see if I could monetize it later. It was straight in, big flow of customers, competitive product, and preserve my time when I do it. So even though I was living in I still live in New Zealand. So in New Zealand dollars, paying anybody on a US salary in US dollars is just impossible pretty much. So I went to Upwork as a platform and found a really nice Jamaican girl who'd worked in banks. She lives in Canada now, but she was my operations manager. So I trained her up and we learned together, paid for her to do various courses. But she had a really complementary skill set to mine. She was very bossy with the suppliers and the shipping agents, and she knew all the Amazon rules and could figure that stuff out every day. She was on it. She had really good attention to detail. So she was coding all the, bookkeeping transactions as we went, which weren't actually too bad for an Amazon business. And then later on, as I've been buying online businesses, I've hired a lady who's what I'd call an online business manager. So she can run reports for me on traffic or which affiliate links are working. She helps me do due diligence on new acquisitions. And she's only part-time as well. She's got her own children and she's self-taught techie, but just has, I think, that 10-year age gap. So I'm 1980s and she would be probably born in 1990 or something, but just that cusp. It doesn't matter what you learned. It's sort of how receptive your brain is to learning all those new tech platforms. So she will look at something and just get it in an instant. And I can do a course and figure it out, but she's just much more intuitive with the tech stuff. So I sort of try and stay strategic. She does all the operations. We outsource all the writing to a really good agency. We use Content Pit and they write all the newsletters or blog posts or reviews of courses. So if there's a course we're reviewing, I'll watch it or listen to it when I'm out for a dog walk or something on double speed. And then we get the transcript of my notes and then an agency will write that up into a beautiful article all optimized for keywords and things. So it gets the traffic and it's useful to the reader and Google likes it for being a human genuinely really leaving a review. So I have some hands-on to some level in every business that I own, but not sort of full-on day-to-day on any of them. And that means I've actually got a spreadsheet up on not spreadsheet, a big chart up on the side wall here on a whiteboard. And I've kind of got them all in a quadrant. There's the sort of the easy business models to the more complex business models. I've got one SaaS business, which is definitely by far the most complex. And you only want one of them on the go at once. And then some of them are really simple, like the newsletter business. And then all we do for the newsletter business is it gets put in a scheduler and it just goes out. There's nothing to do. And the other axis I've got on my chart on my whiteboard behind me is the yield. So as an investor, I want sort of a low complexity business model, but with the highest yield. But sadly, not so many fall into that quadrant. The newsletters, very, very steady, which I love. But there's only so many guest posts you can have in each day in that newsletter. So there's ways I grow it, but it's very simple. Then the SaaS business, I actually plan to sell. And that's a tool that possibly even by the time this podcast goes live, will be live, but I won't name it yet because I might jinx it. But that's days or so away from going live. And that I'm hoping will be a 7-figure exit within a year or maybe 18 months. So we're going to grow that one really aggressively. We've got a great audience for it. It solves an unmet need. We've self-funded it. So I've paid at least 150K US of my own money to build that one. And that's a build to sell play. And it'll be a very niche business to business one. So I still like to build my own or have a bit of a dabble and grow the businesses that I buy. But there's certainly a lot to love about buying a business that's already up and running. Like, I had no idea that you could have a fiction newsletter that goes out to people that want free ebooks every day, but the authors will pay $100 and something for each slot in that daily newsletter that goes out, because it helps them get their book ranked, get some reviews, get it on Amazon, moving through the charts, get the bestseller badge. So it's all something that the authors really benefit from and are happy to pay. So that newsletter, I don't pay for any content. They pay me to put their content in it. And then it just gets sent out. So I love the newsletter business model. I'm actually doing a whole separate training program just for newsletters. The core sort of strategy for buying online businesses are really the kind of the content sites, the kind of the Google ranked pages on reviewing a course, reviewing a guitar, teaching somebody something, and there's a little course on the back end, something like that. And then one SaaS business, and then a few other sort of variations on those themes. But certainly I'm keeping clear of e-commerce businesses to buy. I still think people can do really well with e-commerce or Amazon, but not a thing I would buy off someone else when you don't know all that account history. How reliable is that supply really? What are you really selling it for? So I go through the big brokers, which keeps things efficient on the shortlisting side of things. And there's a certain amount of vetting and verification done on the bigger listings, which makes things a bit quicker to work.
That was going to be my next question is, these businesses that you're talking about are very niche, right? They're on the smaller side of revenue and EBITDA. It sounds like they're probably being run by, it sounds like maybe one or two people. And as you mentioned, even the newsletter business, the operator came with the business. So, if you're going through these larger guys, assuming business brokers you're referring to, that are just essentially finding these businesses and putting them out there. And then, we're going to be talking about the acquisition. So you find these businesses, they meet your criteria, which if you have those and they're easy to rattle off, what are those criteria for people?
Well, I want at least a 2-year payback period. Sometimes the way they've been valued, it sort of says 3 years. I like vendor finance a lot, and that's usually negotiable. And because I've done quite a few deals on these platforms, they can see my personal profile that I'm a serious buyer and completed all my transactions. So I do really good negotiations with them on vendor finance. There's certain business models I love and some I hate. So the ones I really like are things like the newsletters and a really niche content site that's not been affected by previous Google updates. The quality's really high and that it's not too commercial, because Google doesn't like sites that are super commercial. There's also a sweet point for pricing. So if the asking price is $5,000, there's 1,000 people out there a day who could put that on their credit card and not really know what they're doing, but bid away. And there's no need for the vendor to sort of give you any extra training or stagger the payment schedule or something. Once you get up to the big money, there's all the private equity guys with much bigger budgets than mine and whole gangs of lawyers they set on these poor sellers. And they do really big business and they have other people's money and I don't. So I'm in this middle spot where it's always my own money. I think banks generally do not like online businesses as a investment class because, well, there's no security, is there? If Google kills your site, you're dead with nothing to show for it. So that's the risk. That's, talking candidly with your smart investor audience who want to know what's the downside. The downside is you buy a dud and you don't know what you're doing. So you don't want to go into this blind, but the yields should be 30 to 50%, off the bat with very low overhead, no fixed staff, no rent, no vehicles, no insurance. It's very light and lean. I like businesses that are kind of in that 50K to maybe a couple of 100K. And I don't usually pay it all up front. Some of the best deals I've done were at the top end of that. And some of the smaller ones, they don't quite fund the operations. So if you buy a business that's, say, valued at 200K and you take 100K profit out of it, you can easily pay your team and still have profit. But the smaller ones, you don't, although the percentage yield's the same, you don't have enough actual dollars a year to pay the team to cover it. So it's fine as part of a portfolio. And then I think for your first deal, you want to start way smaller than that and just get confident there's due diligence on a physical property, or, buying stocks and shares is a process to do your homework on what metrics you're tracking. But this online business, the process to assess them is a bit different. So anyone who I'm working with, I do a full one-on-one deal assessment with them. And then if it's a big deal, I'd recommend a separate third-party due diligence. So I'm not a software expert. If I could not review the back end of a software business for sale, or the legal stuff around who owns what bits of code, or, all those sorts of things. So the bigger the deal, the more external help you need. But I think the skill set to become a competent online business investor, most people could do it. You don't need to be actually techie, but you need to obviously work with people that are doing some SEO for you or something. So you need to understand the language and what the benchmarks in the industry are and what the gold standard would be, and understand what the business does. So I always would prefer to buy a business I've got some personal interest in, rather than something completely random and just purely data driven. So I bought a guitar site once, but I don't play the guitar and I know nothing about it. So every time there's sort of a to-do list of all the different projects on all the different sites, it sort of always gets pushed to the bottom because I don't come up with original ideas on my own for it. I don't get excited about it. I'm motivated to make it work as an asset, but there's others where I can see a million things to do and they're all fun and interesting and lucrative. So I definitely now only do things I like. Yeah. It's like with property, I've got a few physical properties and I only buy places I would live in myself, or if it's a commercial building, would I use that myself if I had that kind of business? I want to have quality and personal interest. Otherwise, it's just a bit hard to stay engaged, I think. The world's a busy place. You want to do things that you like doing and work with people you like working with.
You just said a lot there. And, I like what you just said as far as, if you're just getting started, you want to buy your own business, start small. But to your point, don't go too small to the point where it's not going to cash flow and take care of it. And there's a few terms I think that we should throw out there for our listeners, which is, when you get to a larger business, like you were saying, it may be $1 million on up in EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Like you said, those are going to be bigger deals. You're going to need some sort of financing. Most people are not going to plop a few $1 million down because there's always a multiple that they're going after, right?
Yeah.
So you're going for those larger ones. Really, really small deals, like you said, even under $100,000, if they're doing less than $100,000 in revenue, it's not really a business yet, right? So you're looking for companies that are doing maybe a couple $100,000, but they have some sort of profits, or in the small business world, seller's discretionary earnings, right? SDE.
Right.
And you found that to be your sweet spot. Primarily, it sounds like because, one, you're putting up your own capital to buy these businesses, and two, because of the very low overhead nature of it, right?
Correct. And some efficiency once you've got a bunch in a portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So talk about that. What do you mean by that? Because, one of the things we haven't talked about is once you buy the business, okay, you may be making a little bit of money every month with them, but what's the long-term plan for this? Like, are you going to take these to an exit? You said they have one that you're building to sell, which we always advocate for here. But what's your long-term play with these if you're buying something in different businesses?
I am buying and holding 90% of them at the moment. And I haven't bought any with the intention to grow and sell. The SaaS business I'm planning to sell, I started myself from scratch. If I was really tricky, I would do some roll-ups. But basically, every single business, I run them like separate business units, and I have my monthly reporting showing profit and loss for each one. The overheads are very thinly spread across the top of all of them. There's not a lot of expense going out. But what I can see is every single business unit I've got, I could double the profit and probably, the efficiencies get better as they get bigger, but I can see ways to double the income of each of those business units with very little effort. So where there's one newsletter, I could do a related newsletter and build a list, and I can use the assets of one business to give another one a bit of a kickstart, cross-pollinate them a bit. So I don't see, the ones that I've bought wouldn't suit a big roll-up and on-sell the whole thing at a bigger multiple to a bigger player in the field. But it's sort of been a kind of a hand-picked bunch of small businesses that interest me and niches where there's plenty of money being spent and I've got a quality bit of content or education or something that is useful usually business recipients of the content, not consumer level. And so I've got this sort of quite healthy looking mix. They cross-pollinate a bit. The team is very small across the top of all of them, and we outsource the writing. And so my game plan is actually to sit tight and enjoy the cash flow and spend some of that buying more businesses and obviously funding the SaaS business, which will take some cash to get out the door and scaling, and there'll be some paid traffic and things there. But I'm just really enjoying it. And there's a whole community of other people getting into it who are learning. And so I'm having fun working with them on the deals they like the look of, what looks good, what's a red flag, what would you do to grow that one? It's, all these sort of like Lego or jigsaw pieces. You can add a newsletter to that site, or this site's great for that niche, but there's another really similar market right next to it. You could actually just duplicate the whole business model, same tech stack, same team, and just have a very similar other offer and build the one just like the proven one.
So I'm really curious, and this may be just for me, but I know our listeners are going to like this too. One of the biggest challenges that we've seen with any business that has online sales of any kind, whether that's coaching, consulting, e-commerce, even anything where you're trying to drive traffic to your site to make it run, is content. Yeah. Content is king, as they say, and we've been teaching this and doing it ourselves and for our businesses and a couple others sometimes. But it sounds like a lot of the businesses you are running are very content heavy. And everybody that we talk to is like, oh man, I don't have time to do the content. How am I going to get the content done to get the SEO rankings, to do the blogs? Or you mentioned affiliates, right? Yeah. There's so many great sites that they're making money as an affiliate, but in order to be an affiliate, you have to constantly be putting new stuff out there and letting your list know and all that. So how do you guys handle the content? You said that you outsource it. You don't have to give up your secrets if you don't want to, but no, it is really intriguing because that's a really big piece of this.
Yeah. Well, the site I bought last year, the last deal I did actually a few months back, that was $350K, and it makes over $100K a year profit off 30 articles, which were built up over 3 years. So I've just inherited all that hard work someone else did. And those 30, I think it's 35 articles. They did one a month for 3 years since lockdown. So that's when they started it. And that generates 6 figures a year. So I can add to that, but it's sort of up and running without me having to add new content. I mean, I will update courses from time to time or update the pricing if that's changed. But there's very little work to do on that one through necessity. I could choose to grow it, which I do. So that one really reviewed things like Masterclass and Udemy and Skillshare courses. And I'm going to add in some of the new language learning courses because there's some serious traffic looking to find out which is the best AI-driven language course out there. So I think AI is a really useful thing for the content side. It doesn't necessarily, I don't have any articles going out on content sites that are written by AI. I work with one agency, Content Pit, who are really, really good. They've got various options on their menu. Do you want it written fully by humans, AI assisted, or do you just want sort of cheap AI drivel, which nobody ever wants the cheap AI stuff. Google's really just kicking that up straight away. So I've never done a pure AI, but AI assisted is, I think, quite useful for just getting basic stuff in a form where a human can finish it up and add their touch and double check the facts and things. So I keep clear of any subjects, like medical stuff or investing advice. I don't want to do anything tricky, but guitar stuff, that's fine. And the newsletter for the other authors actually pay to be in that newsletter. So I don't have to produce any content. It's user-generated content and they pay me to put it there. So that's a really neat model. So I've got a newsletter where I pay a writer $160 and he does one article a week. And he's a human. He's very highly educated. He's actually an engineer. He lives in Europe and he writes a really intelligent newsletter on a subject that newsletter is going to have sponsors and affiliate links. And it's a new one, which I'm growing up from a small base. So I certainly think there's a ton of people out there who can do the content for you. I like a one-stop shop. So the person I'm dealing with, I get some more purchasing power, but they put their best people on it and they know what I like and they put my stuff to the top of the list. So I've had a really good relationship with some good agencies, which has helped. I think if you hire a writer in-house, it can be a bit cheaper But then if they have an off day, you're not checking their quality, and it's then my job to keep up to date with the latest SEO trends and what Google liked in the last update. Whereas the agencies, that's their job, and they just one-stop shop. And the price per word is so low. I just don't think you could run it and manage it in-house for as high a quality at that price. Unless you're a born writer and it's what you'd love to do and you're choosing that. But I don't think anyone listening to this or any of my students are in that camp. So you could, have a passion project where you do your writing if you want a creative outlet. But I just see it like a machine. You've got your keywords in demand, what's already in the market, and then fill in some gaps. And over time, you rise to the top because Google gives you that extra credibility for having indexed for the right keywords with users staying on the page and clicking through and stuff. So when you buy a business, you're not waiting in that Google sandbox for 6 months while they decide if you're any good or not. You're buying a Google track record, which is very useful. And so there's metrics like the DR, the domain authority numbers, are a hard measure of what Google thinks of that site. So when you're buying a site, you can look up those hard facts on what Google thinks of that site, and you can see the traffic through the updates. So there's a lot less risk doing that than starting a business from scratch, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I keep telling my partners and my investors, if you ever see me try to start another business, just shoot me. I've done too many of those from the ground up. Enough failures in the graveyard, and I have plenty of equity in the graveyard too of other companies I've advised starting up. But yeah, the buying businesses can be very lucrative. It can be very fun. And you mentioned something earlier, which is you have these easy businesses that are not hard to understand, that are cash flowing, that are making money. Maybe they're not moonshots, as a lot of people like to say in the startup world, but who cares, right? If it's just something that you're making money with and you're enjoying your life, it's a great fit, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of the portfolio effect takes out the stress. If one of them is a bit seasonal or one of them does get affected by something you haven't done wrong, but things go up and down. I wouldn't sleep as well at night if I had it all on $1 million business, but if I've got 10, 100K businesses, that's a pretty healthy income stream, not much work, and it's quite fun learning. I've actually really enjoyed it. So Amazon was always, there was a bit of a thrill in choosing the product, and I used to go and do some great trips off to India and places to source products, and I had a great time doing it. But once you had that product on Amazon and everyone was coming up after you and Amazon's rules would change, it was quite stressful. Yeah. And there's not much thrill in shipping labels and logistics of a product you're trying to stay in stock and juggling cash flow and juggling inventory, and supplier goes on holiday for a month or goes dark. There's a lot of complexity there. And it could be a big account, but, as you've experienced, there's big growing pains too.
Absolutely.
So this one, I don't want any high drama. I want to sleep well at night. I want to enjoy the US currency coming into me in New Zealand. That's a huge advantage. I buy them in New Zealand in USD, but also my income streams in USD. And then if I want to, invest in property in New Zealand, I can do that with cash, but I can't borrow against these income streams. So that's one limiting factor, is just the banks won't lend you on these businesses or against the income streams generally. But there are a couple of things. SBA does have some online businesses it will lend against. And there's a new company, well, not that new, but Boopos, strange name, BOOPOS. They kind of co-invest with you. And you should actually get Ignacio on your show because he'd be interesting to talk to about online deals that they fund. And Boopos sort of puts some funds in as well. They do their own due diligence and they kind of co-invest with you. And that might make a deal more affordable for someone to do a bigger deal with a partner than all cash on their own, but smaller. But I haven't had any horror stories. My students who I'm helping do this are really enjoying it and picking out the business models they like quite early on and getting good at one type. Just like with property, you could either do apartments or do, condos somewhere, or be a developer and build from scratch, or renovate and flip. There's all these different variations in that industry. I like the quality content sites where I can see I could grow them and they're kind of settled in, steady, evergreen topics. A mix of ad income and affiliate income, maybe some sponsorship on a newsletter. I wouldn't buy a SaaS business, and I wouldn't actually buy an Amazon business just because you don't know the history of any quality issues. which could come back to bite you. And you don't know, somebody might be able to show a 10K a month profit, but they've spent 30K on Facebook ads elsewhere. You just can't sort of match it all up or track it very clearly. Whereas if you're buying a Google business that relates to Google, you can see the traffic from a third-party source. You can see which keywords it's ranked for. You can see traffic over time. You can see domain authority. You can see the earnings of the advertising. You can see the earnings of the affiliate links. So you know where you're at, which is easier to read the future. And then there's a few other things I factor in. Obviously like to have some personal interest in the subject, like to be able to grow it, and don't want to fix up other people's mistakes. Sometimes there's something that's really heavily discounted and it had a great year last year, but suddenly ground to a halt. Somebody else might want to take on those challenges, but I just sort of want the slam dunks. No big dramas, no problems, no good stories from the vendor why this temporary blip will be all fixed the second I give them $1 million.
Right.
Just want it simple. So I've got far less ambition to grow massive businesses than I did when I had Amazon businesses doing 7 figures a year. It gets to be this really heady high of, I could go bigger and bigger and more products. But actually I'm really, don't know why it is. I've just sort of settled down. Maybe it's just a personality thing, but I'm actually much happier with a steadier, smaller income stream that lets me have lots of free time.
The stress can really eat into you, right? And then all of a sudden you don't have that stress anymore. Because I've been there, right? You get into this place where you are go 24/7, 365. And like you said, you're excited about it because you see the money coming in. We were literally spending $100,000 to $150,000 per day on advertising profitably. And you can imagine the level of stress that goes along with that if your ad account gets shut down or the payment doesn't get made on time or
the shipment gets lost.
A million things, right? And so I can definitely appreciate the easy, lucrative and fun business model. So I know that a lot of people will probably resonate with that as well. So Sophie, we're out of time here, but I really do appreciate you being here. It's been a pleasure. And I know that a lot of people are going to really enjoy this and they might have a lot more questions and follow up for you. And I know you have a lot of resources available. So why don't you tell folks how they can find you?
Oh, thanks, Jeff. Well, there's a free book, which we can add in the show notes, a link to download that. It's called Freedom Navigator, which is all about buying online businesses. And I'll share in there in more detail and the numbers of some of the deals I've done in the last 12, 24 months. So there's that. Also, if people think they might seriously want to do this, I run a community and coaching. So there's a course and then a weekly live call, plus me and my team doing one-on-one deal reviews and helping you assess the deals and then also build the skills to manage the sites you buy. So we started out just teaching people how to buy the sites and what to look for and how to work with the brokers and the vendors and different business models. But actually, as soon as people had sites, they all put their hands up saying, we need some help now with finding a content team or whatever. So we've broadened out the teaching side to be all the maintenance and operations as well as the buying front end, exciting one-off stuff. So that course is also called Freedom Navigator, and we can pop a link in the show notes to that. So freedomnavigator.com. And it's not for everyone. You've got to be a little bit willing to deal with tech people, not high tech, not like developers or anything, but somebody who's talking to you about SEO or I think we should change the design of this WordPress landing page. That kind of thing needs to not freak you out too much. And you can learn all the language, and it's not like you have to be techie, but it is, obviously online. And because you can't borrow to do these sorts of deals, it sort of suits people who've got maybe a bit of cash, a bit of time, an inquiring mind. If you want to learn something, or you can even buy a site on something that you're personally interested in and sort of get the tax advantage of running a business around your favorite passion. I've got people who've just bought a pickleball blog, and they're mad about pickleball, but now they've, got some business expenses going through and they're off to pickleball tournaments and buying all the latest rackets. If they have rackets.
All sorts of fun advantages to run these businesses, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, we've got a really nice community. We have confidentiality agreements for those that don't want to share anything. And then we've got a mutual confidentiality agreement if we're discussing deals as a group, which is actually usually the best way to pick them apart and get some ideas. And then some one-on-one time as well. So pretty good bundle of support given how variable the deals are as well. It'd be pretty hard to come in cold on your own and pick a winner, I'd say. So there's some help at hand if you would like it.
Sounds wonderful. Well, Sophie Howard, thank you so much for being here today on the Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions podcast. If you're interested in learning more about this, make sure you go ahead and check out the show notes. We'll have all those links in there as well. And as always, like, subscribe, and share, and let's get this podcast out there. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Jeff.